To report human trafficking, or if you need help now, go to polarisproject.org, POLARISPROJECT.org. You can call 1-888-373-7888 or text BeFree, capital B-E, capital F-R-E-E, to the number 233733. To report human trafficking, or if you need help now, you can contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Website www.ncmec.org or dial 1-800-THE-LOST, 1-800-843-5678. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Forensic Friday. I am Shannon, your host, and tonight is Exposed Part 2, The Dark Side of Human Trafficking. If you're with us for Part 1, where we discuss the criminal side of online technology, the same detective will be with us. His credentials are exceptional. He works in human trafficking directly, and to give you just a few things that this man is worthy of this podcast, he has been a police officer for 22 years. He, for the past 12 years, was assigned to the Detective Bureau. The last 10 years for the Special Victims Units. He handles crimes against children on the internet and human trafficking. He's also on the South Florida Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. He handles the police department's digital forensics. And he also, as of 2014, joined the FBI's Crimes Against Children Task Force and was deputized as a task force officer with the FBI. So this gentleman knows very much what he's talking about. We will not be showing his identity tonight. We will be concealing it due to his undercover work. We do not want to expose anything or cause any problems for him, but we are so appreciative that he has taken time out of his crazy schedule to discuss this very, very serious topic with us tonight on Forensic Friday, the dark side of human trafficking. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to Forensic Friday. I am here with our detective that is going to be discussing human trafficking with us. So welcome, detective. Welcome back to Forensic Friday.
Hi there. Thank you.
We're very happy to have you back. And I gave your stats, your incredible stats and your expertise in the intro. But why don't you go ahead and tell everybody, you've been an officer for 22 years. How did you get into the line of work where you are now covering human trafficking?
So back in 2012, I was assigned to our Special Victims Unit. And at that time, we were starting up our internet crimes against children and human trafficking portion of a Special Victims Unit. And so at that point, I was assigned to the Internet Crimes Against Children and Human Trafficking Task Force in Broward County. And at that point, I started to learn more about trafficking, and then realizing that just in our city alone, we had some issues that we needed to address, and started working them and then developing the cases that way.
Okay, so I'm going to get right off the bat here. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, children, all of that. There was a time, and it didn't seem all that long ago, that these were things that were maybe in movies, like the movie Taken. This wasn't something that parents or people really discussed. It was something in the movies. It's as if it didn't exist. But the fact is, it does exist, and it does exist in our own backyard. It's not something that happens in a far off country. It's right here. What are your thoughts on that?
It's where you think that it's not. Let's put it that way. Kind of, if it's all over the place. It's when you think that it's not going on, it's probably going on. It's in major events. The biggest, we find when there's major events, that's usually when it's, I don't want to say at its peak, but in an area where there is a major event, it's usually at its peak at that point.
And when you say major event, you're talking, Super Bowl or a sporting event, or, big things where it draws a huge crowd.
Correct. Yeah. So like when the Super Bowl was here in Miami, we we had a large group of people working like human trafficking cases, because leads would come in, cases would come in because of the fact, more cases and more leads would come in because of the fact that the Super Bowl was in town. Recently, we had the Formula One races down here in Miami, and similar. We had leads and we had cases coming in because an event was in town. More so than on a regular day when there's, I don't want to say nothing going on, but less than a major event. So,
and why is that?
Because more people are in a general area at one time, and they're usually there to party and have a good time.
And that means just abducting women, children, boys, whomever. And it's just, this whole topic it gets under my skin, and I just find it completely horrid that there's a big event. Okay, let's start. There's more human trafficking. It just sounds so insane to me.
Because the event brings in so much money, and you think about it, you have, not the greatest way to think about it, but you have a thing like the Super Bowl, which brings in millions of dollars in revenue to the general area. But you got people that are here partying and having a good time, and they want to have an extra good time. Unfortunately, that involves other things.
So to get to that extra good time, let's just start from the beginning. Take us through how this all begins. How does one get trapped, lured, what have you, abducted? How do they end up part of human trafficking?
Most of the times, it's one of those too good to be true scenarios. So there'll be kids, and when I say kids, kids under 18, or even adults that'll, I had a case where the girl, she was in a bad situation. Mom and dad were divorced. She's living with dad. Dad treats her like crap, and never around. She kind of had to fend for herself and felt that she had to fend for herself. So she decided to go answer an ad on Craigslist for modeling. And she thought, hey, if I can make some extra money modeling, then I'll do that. Well, she did, and wound up getting, sucked into getting trafficked until she was able to get herself away.
That makes her lucky.
Correct. Yeah, and most of the times I don't want to say they're able to get away, but they're at some point able to either get away or get some other message out to get us involved. Not always, but in most cases, we find that's the case. You do have those that are abducted or kidnapped and forced into this, and yeah, you spend all the time in the world trying to find them. It's almost impossible. So we do have those. So it's one of those, like in that girl's situation, she was in a bad situation, and then somebody came along and offered her money, not for what she wanted to do, but maybe it was. But the fact that she saw dollar signs far more than she had before that is what lured her into the industry, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's usually what it is with kids, is they get enticed by the money, and then once that they get sucked in, they either don't want to get out, or it's very hard for them to get out.
Now, is it like what you see and we'll just use the movies, because that's how most people, that's their only reference. A lot of us, I've never had to deal with anything like this, and thank God I haven't had to with my children. All I see is the movies, and I've heard horrific stories. They're enticed by the money, or they're unfortunately victims of lack of attention, lack of parenting, and they see dollar signs, they see something better potentially, and then they get lured into it that way with promises of money and gifts and things of that nature. Now, once they have them, let's just say, well, you use your example, this girl answered an ad and then she got swayed by the dollar signs. Are they kept by fear, drug addiction, or what keeps them there? Because obviously walking out and leaving would potentially leave the person who has them being able to be found by the good guys like you. So obviously they don't want these people coming and going. So how do they keep them?
They usually, well, it'll start off with everything goes well because she's making good money. And then all of a sudden it's, instead of making 100% profit, she's making 50% and then 25%. And then it dwindles down to little or nothing. And then they either have to decide, and then that's where the trauma comes into them as to whether it's time for me to go or I just got to live with this. And unfortunately at that age, most of them don't know about leaving and they feel trapped. So, and because it's not something that happens like within a day, you're talking about a few weeks. So they've already developed relationships and things like that. So you're talking about that, and then they're stuck between a rock and a hard place because do I leave and with the potential of making more money? But I'm in another shitty situation. So now what do I do? So they're stuck, and they've already been through a lot of trauma in that part. And when you deal with trauma care like that, it's hard to get them to break that cycle unless usually they've been injured in some way to the point where they need to be helped, or they get away and I don't want to say the light bulb goes off, but something hits them and they're like, this is not for me. This is not what I signed up for. And then they get away or they get out.
Okay, so it sounds a little bit like there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit of crossover between prostitution and human trafficking.
Correct. So the human trafficking part comes in when, so the legal definition is a forced fraud or coercion of a person, usually a minor, for sex. So if there's any of that going on in the course of the transactions, whether a lot of times what we'll see is the pimp or the person in control of the girl is requiring a payment. So whatever the services are, they get a cut. And like I said, sometimes it'll be very little at the beginning, and so they're really excited because they're making a whole bunch of money, and then it becomes more and more and more, and they're making less and less and less, or nothing at all.
Now, when you say these girls, maybe sometimes they can leave, are these girls, while they're doing this, living outside the home, living with the person who is controlling their money and what they're doing?
Majority of the times, yes.
Okay. Now, you refer to girls. Is this mostly girls? And if so, what age? What is the age bracket?
Yes, it is mostly girls, even though boys can be. But we find girls are mainly the ones victimized. We've had kids as young as 12, 13, that get involved in it, and you have to go try to help them and figure out what's going on. I mean, it goes all the way up to adulthood, even when they're adults. It continues into adulthood. So yeah, there's no real range. I mean, you would hope the younger the child, the less likely somebody would be interested, but you do have those people that aren't.
It's just a sick world out there.
Right. So there really isn't like a age range, but we normally find teenage girls, and then adults are the ones that are participating.
Okay. And I'm glad you just said that the adults are participating. So, and this all costs money, and you're going to the Super Bowl, you're going to Formula One, you're going to these events, you're there, you want to have a great time, you're spending money. It's pretty easy to say the people who are actually paying for these girls and boys, that are most likely under 18, are not, people without money. These are executives. These are corporate people.
Yes, you get your range of suspects that are involved. We've had police officers. We've had like major directors of government agencies. We've had some high up in different organizations, like companies and things like that. But you get the middleman and you get the low man too. So I think it's what they want to do and what their mindset is.
Yeah, but it just goes to show you that, it's not the bad guy or the guy, that's in the shadows. These are people that probably we see on TV if they're any type of government person or running huge companies as well. There could be the man next door that's actually partaking in this.
Correct.
And that's the scary part, because like you said, if you don't know what's happening there, that's probably where it's at. It's happening right underneath our noses.
Mm-hmm.
People are hiding in plain sight because are they protected when they get caught? Is there a big hush hush? There's these human trafficking, sex trafficking rings, and there's many of them. How many would you say? Could you even guess?
No, because each geographical area has their own different like numbers that they would be dealing with. And I mean, not that Miami's not a large city, but you have other areas that have other larger areas than Miami that would have larger numbers,
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but there are a large number. It's just a matter of finding them.
Yeah. And you just don't see, if either everybody's so hidden underground, you just don't see reports of people getting caught with this. And like you said, these events, the Super Bowl, the Formula One, just use those as an example because you're talking about Florida where you live. If the numbers are so great during those events, where is the media coverage of these people getting caught?
Well, the problem is that not necessarily the problem, but so we'll have an event and we'll go make an arrest, but depending on when trial might not be for a few months down the road. The event's already over with.
No, I realize that, but it's been a long time since the Super Bowl. I've heard anything.
Right. And we just had, I want to say our squad just had one that took a plea from the Super Bowl recently. So, it's
and this is no dig against you. I'm just talking about the media coverage of people getting caught,
Well, normally we don't do press releases right away because of the fact that, okay, so I recover one girl, but it might lead to us finding others. So therefore, if I publicize the case now, I might not be able to find those others. So therefore, that infringes upon our investigation. So that would be one of the reasons why. And most government agencies tend not to publicize certain arrests until after conviction because they're still considered innocent until proven guilty or they take a plea. But so that would be another reason why it's probably not publicized until after trial or after conviction, to make sure that that's it's solidified, it's done. Understood.
Now, we're talking about this happened in our own backyard. What are the numbers where these girls or boys and whomever get, when I say whomever, meaning boys and girls, they get lured in or sucked into this way of life? How many do you find that stay here in the US, and how many do you find that get taken out right away?
we don't really have that I know of, and not something that I've done a lot of, but international human trafficking. It is there. It's just not something that we normally see. Not to say that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
Um, it is common, but that the problem with those, and those more deal, it's not human trafficking, it's more like labor trafficking. But the problem with those is you're bringing in somebody from another country here to the United States to do work. And think about where they're coming from. Majority of the times they're coming from a country that's either communism or socialism or something where it's completely, expensive, and they don't get a lot of stuff. And you bring them to America where they have tons more freedom. They're making money. They may not like what they're doing, but they're making money, and they can do whatever they want for the most part because they're still under the control of the trafficker. But their lifestyle is completely different than what it was there. Why would they want to go back home to the, I don't want to say terrible, but the roughness of home that was back in home? Then okay, I got to live with this, doing this, and I can make all this money and live here in America. So they tend to, I don't want to say outweigh the bad with the good, but that's kind of what their mindset is. And they don't, some of that we've found some that just don't want to cooperate because they don't want to go back home.
That to them, home and the conditions at home are far worse than here in America. So they'd rather just deal with it and stay.
Correct.
What about how many Americans get taken out of our country?
Not many that I know of. We don't really see that too often. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I don't see that as common or often. And usually when that happens, like the State Department will get involved, and there's other federal agencies that will get involved to help locate the person and try to get them back quicker than, not to say that the other way around, where a person here from another country wouldn't be looked at either, but I don't think that it's as common as like the movies would make it out to be.
Okay. Now, the one thing that I had read in the news recently was the 14 or 15-year-old girl that was taken from the Dallas Mavericks game right there in the arena. She went to bathroom at halftime and was gone. And the father, I believe she was there with her father, and she notified the police there at the arena, the American Airlines Center. And it sounded to me like they did pretty much a half-ass effort. I don't even think they asked the father for a photo of her. But basically, he couldn't even file a report with the police there. He had to wait and go home and file a report with the police agency where he lived. Is this something that you run into when people are trying to find their loved one, that you say, oh, sorry, it's wrong agency, you're going to have to go home, even though she got taken right here from the Mavericks game? There's nothing we can do. I mean, that sounds absurd.
Yeah, no, we don't handle things that way. Especially when it comes to missing people, majority of the times, not in this case, the case you described, but majority of the times missing people are not considered a crime. So we do what we can to try to find them as best as possible. But in the case you described, it was a crime. So, an abduction. So it should have been handled as such, as an abduction, or a kidnapping, or something along those lines, where even, I mean, I've done it before where I've started a case because they come in and claim that the abduction or the kidnapping occurred in our jurisdiction, and you start the case, you start working it, and if you deem that it's somebody else's, you continue to work it until that other jurisdiction joins into the investigation and takes it over, and then you pass it off to them to make sure that it still continues going and it's still working. You don't just tell them have a nice day and call somebody else. That's a little messed up.
Well, detective, I'm very glad that you are more responsible and a better person than that. Yeah, the family was just so beside themselves because they weren't getting any help. They actually ended up contacting the Texas Counter Trafficking Initiative in Houston, and they used their face recognition technology, and they were able to find her within the same day. That I think is remarkable. Those people need a standing ovation, just like you and the team that you work with need a standing ovation. But it's horrible to think that the family had to go so far out of their way to get their daughter that was taken at halftime from a bathroom at a Mavericks game. This is why I'm saying this is so horrific. This is in our backyard. And the fact that someone can get away with taking a 15-year-old from a bathroom, and I believe they later found on security, she was walking out with a gentleman. These people are bold. They are not afraid.
No, I mean, and that would be more of a situation where I could see that happening in the sense of it's a public place with a whole lot of people there, as opposed to a public place where it's only, one or two people around. It would make more sense to do it in a secluded area because, we're very little people around because usually there's probably nobody watching. But on the other side of that too, you do that and those one or two other people that are there are usually going to be your good witnesses. Whereas you got thousands of people at a game, nobody's going to notice anything, usually.
Yeah, and they found her at a hotel. I forget what the name of the hotel is now that I'm looking for it, but they actually found her. She's a 15-year-old girl, shows up with this older gentleman at a hotel. He rents out several rooms, has traffic coming in and out, and the hotel doesn't think that there's something weird going on. So why don't you tell us, what can someone watch for that could see that there is a person that's being trafficked in a way and they may need help? What do you look for?
Well, their behavior. I mean, for the most part, they're in public. If they're in public, they're usually timid, afraid. It's not like, the 15-year-old would be walking with their parents and happy-go-lucky and, normal child and parent. You see usually the timidness, the afraid. They're bundled up, they're covered up quite a bit so they can't be recognized or noticed. Wearing a hoodie in the middle of 100 something degree heat, things like that. It just their behaviors don't look, their behaviors look out of place as to if they really were to be whatever relatives of some type. Their behaviors don't match that demeanor. And it's better off that somebody checks out with them to figure out what, even if it's a bystander, just, hey, what's going on? Even if it is, whatever, father and daughter having an argument and they're just, moping around together, that's fine, but at least it's checked out. As opposed to just letting it go by and not checking it out to see if there is something going on.
Yeah, and an example, and I found it in the article, it was an extended stay hotel more than 200 miles away from where the Mavericks were playing. I mean, at any point, you would think, human common sense, there's this young girl, 15-year-old girl, shows up with this older gentleman, traffic going in and out of the room. I mean, I don't know how people drop the ball. I'm so thankful there's people like you actually trying to, tie up those loose ends and find these people. And if you do suspect something like that, who do you contact?
So there's a couple of different people. Well, obviously the local police would be the first ones to call because they're easily able to respond. If it's not something of, I won't say urgent, but like something like you're on viewing and maybe just have information to pass along. There's two organizations that handle human trafficking for the most part. One is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So there's a hotline there that they can, at a website where people can make reports anonymously. We would ask that they're not anonymous, simply for the fact of people tend to put things in their reports, and then us as investigators have far more questions asked. They could be anonymous later on, but at least we have the ability to reach out to ask a few more questions before they become anonymous. So
I didn't realize that. That's nice to know that you can be available for questions and actually continue to help and then become anonymous.
Yeah, and there's ways of protecting the identity of the reporter if need be. But we've gotten reports before where they're generic reports, and it's grateful, but it's like I'd have a whatever a few more questions asked, and I can't because they don't have a way to contact the person. So that would be one organization. Another one is called the Polaris Project, and that is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and they both have phone numbers and websites that they can people can call and or report tips online to either one of the organizations, and both organizations work together. I don't want to say work together, but they work side by side. So
yeah.
If one feels that the other one should be getting the tip too, then that they pass them on amongst the two organizations. Plus they, once they're able to somewhat geolocate where the investigation should be, they send those tips to local law enforcement for them to then start investigating. So those would be the two. Most areas have a Crime Stoppers, a tip line that they can use too. So something like that, or like I said, the local police or sheriff's office that they have.
Okay. Now I attended a human trafficking seminar that Kaiser hosted a couple months back. And what I could not believe was that young girls with promises of money were actually recruiting for these rings, meaning they'll give them money and these girls would get these other girls to come in and be part of these rings. And then they would get, the girls who recruited them would get this cash, and they were on video bragging, oh, I can't wait. I get to go get the purse that I want. Or they would beat the girls up and bring them into the ring. I was horrified at that. These girls they're doing it to their own peers.
Correct, because they see the money, and that's I'm going out on a limb, but I'm going to guess that where they were coming from was a pretty crappy situation. They had unstable houses, poor or little income in the family. Some of the times too, you're one of X number of kids in the house, so by that age you're usually probably the oldest or the middle, towards the oldest. So, and again, nothing against the parents, but like you have a bunch of kids in the house and you're focusing on the younger ones, the older ones getting neglected, and there's not much money to begin with. That's a reason for them to start looking at other things, other ways of finding it. You have parents that aren't involved, and it goes kind of back to like some of the internet safety stuff too. Like if you're not going through your kid's phone and your kids' devices to see what they're doing, you're going to miss the fact that they're having a conversation with this person that's going to recruit them into something. So that's a big plus in getting ahead of the game, is making sure that you're doing those things to prevent them from happening.
I have to tell you, Detective, I can only imagine the atrocities that you have seen. I mean, also, you working on the crimes against children on the internet, and part of this seminar, this human trafficking seminar that Kaiser hosted, which I have to tell you, they did a beautiful job in the most worst of topics, is I could not get over how many people will pay to watch videos of the most horrific things done to kids. And I'm not even going to describe it on air because I don't want anybody to have the memory that I now have. It still keeps me up at night. I have so much to commend you, your team, other teams like you across our country that are trying their best to bring these kids back home and to break up these rings, because it's disgusting what people will pay for to watch, and how they get that up on the internet to me is so horrific.
Yes, and you do have some websites that will, I don't want to say help, but they will look at the pictures manually, look at the pictures and see if they appear to be very young, and they'll flag them in some way or take them down because they appear that way. So you do have some help with that, but most of those websites and stuff are really just in it for the money too. So they're looking at numbers, how much money can we make?
It's just and I just have to pray that you and teams like you, when you get a hold of those people, I don't know how I would be able to hold. I would be tying them up from a really high place in a really infested area and just let nature do its business. I would have a hard time just even putting that person in a car without hurting them.
We can't do that.
I know. I'm talking about myself. I'm commending you because I really would just want to tear some of these people limb from limb.
The nice thing, I guess if you want to say nice thing, the nice thing is that when caught and taken to trial or plea, the sentencing guidelines are pretty high for them. So they tend to not see the light of day for quite a while. And most of the times, these types of cases, they're mandatory sex offender registration. So again, they may get 10 or 15 years in prison, but they still have a lifetime of registering as a sex offender. So not that that's going to stop them from certain things, but it is a label that they will not get rid of and make their lives a lot difficult. So it does, there is some justice and recourse, I guess you could say that way. But you got to get to that point. You got to have the cooperating victim, and you got to get the case going and things like that to get it to where it's at that point,
Yeah. Have you noticed, has there been an uptick in these rings and people going into these trafficking rings? And if so, what do you believe the cause is? Sure, there's multiple.
I don't know if there's so much of an uptick. I think it's just depends on the availability of people in the area, and what's being offered. If it's one of those situations where the kid has the opportunity to make a ton of money, and they supposedly are going to be modeling or doing whatever at first, and then they're sucked into something else, the money is what draws them to it, because they're not getting it the legal way. They're not making that same money by going to a fast food restaurant or a grocery store to work, or things like that. They're making it far faster and far more than they would in a normal job that they would get. Okay. So I don't know so much that there's more of rings, but I think it's more of when it's more of an opportunity.
And if there's opportunity to make money, people jump on that. That's for sure, no matter what they're doing.
Correct.
When you gave out the phone numbers, if someone were to see something, to see something, say something, these are numbers you can call. Would those be the same numbers if parents or loved ones have a child or a loved one or a sibling that goes missing and that believes something like this could happen? Could they also call those numbers and those websites?
Yes, the National Center for Missing Exploited Children deals with missing children, sometimes missing adults, depending on the situation, but mostly missing children. So yes, that would be, even if they don't suspect human trafficking at first, they can report their child besides law enforcement, because that's one of the things that the organization is going to ask, is that you reported it to law enforcement. So okay. As far as the missing child is concerned, they're going to ask that. But so that organization will can be one that you do that too. Also, the Polaris Project, you can report them, and they, like I said, they work kind of hand in hand with the National Center. So if they feel that if a tip came into the Polaris Project that should probably be handled more by the National Center, they'll probably duplicate it and send it over to them also.
So if there is anybody out there that's listening or watching that is being kept against their will and does want to find safety, what numbers or websites could they look for?
The same. They can call the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. They can call the Polaris Project, which is the National Human Trafficking Hotline.
Okay.
They can call their local police department. They can, if they're able to get to an officer, and however they get to the officer, whether it's, calling because they allegedly, let's just say, lost their cell phone or lost, their ID and they need to make a report, at least they get in contact with an officer, and then they can pull the officer to the side and try to explain to them, hey, I need help, and try to get help that way. But at least get to the officer or get to law enforcement to report it.
And I would imagine the prevention of it is, well, it sounds like it starts at home. Is there also, like this poor girl that went to the Mavericks game? I mean, she went to the bathroom at halftime. I mean, we used to watch out for the bad guy. And then it was, you had to just make sure your kid's candy at Halloween didn't have a razor blade in it. Now it seems like you have to be careful. Their own peers are luring them in. This could be a corporate guy that drives a nice car could be utilizing these rings as much as someone who, is a drug addict. It's like, who do you watch out for? How do you prevent this?
You watch out for everybody because there's nobody specific. You got to have a conversation with your children too about
Starts at home. Yeah.
What to do in an event of a, possible abduction. Do you have the phone? If you have a phone, like if you have an iPhone, for example, do you know how to set off the emergency alert? Do you teach them to scream and yell? And it's a program that some, I don't know if it's just police agencies, but and some private gyms may do it too. It's called RAD, R-A-D, Kids.
Okay.
And it's kind of teaches kids like self-defense, not in the karate, jujitsu
Like escape
kind of
self-defense.
way. It's like stranger danger self-defense. Like they dress up in red man suits, as adults, and they come up as a stranger and try to take the kid, and they teach the kid, hey, hit in certain spots and hit, where to hit, what to do, what to scream and yell, where to go, kind of things. So if that is being offered anywhere in your area, then that was a good program. And it's mainly for, I think it's mainly for younger kids, but younger, like I would probably say 12 and under, but I can't see why a teenager couldn't benefit from it too. It's just different. Obviously you're teaching a teenager different than, a 9 or 10-year-old, but it's a very good program. And if that's not available, just even a basic self-defense class. Nobody says they have to be a black belt in karate or jujitsu or anything, but something just basic to get their feet under and their feet wet, and them understanding about self-defense.
Yeah, I had read, and you tell me your thoughts on this. I had read in one of my books, how to stay away, get yourself out of trouble. And if someone comes up to you, and this is for anybody listening, if someone comes up to you and threatens to take you, threatens your family, just come with me, don't say anything, don't scream. Basically, the worst thing you could ever possibly do is go to a secondary location. Nothing good is going to happen. So fight like hell and don't let them intimidate you to say nothing. Don't scream. Don't do anything. Fight, because once you hit that secondary location, odds go way down.
Right. No, you're right. You know, they, even though you're told not to scream and yell, it's your life's in danger at that point. You do what you can, fight or flight,
Yeah.
and you go as best as you can and you find that most of the times that the abductors are males, so you hit them, you know, in the important areas where it's going to hurt them, and make sure that it disables them, even if it only disables them for a short period of time. You can get away in that shorter period of time.
And scream and yell and cause a commotion, because you
Right.
don't want to go to that secondary location.
Correct.
Do you find that there's certain areas within the United States where there's more of this? Is this, or is it, you know, is it more popular? And I use that term very loosely. Do you just find that certain areas have more of these problems and these rings than others?
No, it's kind of one of those, unfortunately, it's all over. What you find too is that those small little areas that think they don't have it, and just kind of, I don't want to say take a blind eye to it, but think they don't have it, don't realize that they have it. And it's not, I don't want to say handled properly, but it's kind of brushed under the rug sometimes.
Yeah, because it's bad publicity for certain areas. No one wants to say that.
Right.
You know,
but I wouldn't say it's heavier in one area than another. I think it's just it's all over.
And it's all different levels of income. It could be in a higher income level area to a low income level area. It's everywhere.
Correct.
I just find it so appalling. And if anybody is listening to this and you are involved in a ring, or you use these rings for your own satisfaction, I just think you are the scum of the earth, and just karma needs to just get a hold of you and do its own justice, because I think these people are disgusting. That's how I feel.
Things come back to haunt them.
Yeah. So I know you had talked about that one case. Do you have a case that you could really bring home to people to let them know that this truly does exist and this is what happens to people?
Yeah. So we had a girl. She was 15 at the time. She was a ward of the state, so she was already taken from her parents' custody for whatever reason, whatever abusive situation or neglectful situation, and she was in state custody as a foster kid, and ran away from her group home and decided to meet up with this gentleman, I guess you can call him for now, and who promised her the world. He took her, fed her, provided her with a nice apartment. She got clothes, and she got her hair done, she got her nails done, things that she got on a regular basis that she never got or never would have gotten if she was with either in DCF custody and or with her parents. So things were great for her. He forced her to have sex with him in order for her to then have to work. That was the first thing. So then after that, she had to work and was forced. He would post ads on internet sites, and dates would come, or she would go to the dates. He would take her, and at first it was, again, it wasn't. I don't say it wasn't bad. It was things were fine in the sense of she was making a decent amount of money. because the cut was, 50-50, or she was making decent money. But as it progressed, it went from, 50-50 to 60-40 to, 70-30, to the point where she was doing it and wasn't getting paid for anything. And I think at that point she had realized enough's enough. But by that point, she had already, I don't want to say recruited, but got one of her friends to join her, who was 14 at the time. So they were both involved at that point with this person. And the 15-year-old just like, I've had enough. So she fled. She was able to get away. And she came to the police department and reported what was going on. Subsequently resulted in her and I spoke for, gosh, I want to say at the initial interview, I want to say it was probably a good 2-3 hours, just gathering all the information and things that the trauma that she went through, the trauma that she was going through, things like that. And then, so doing those types of interviews, you have to deal with, you're going to go through a roller coaster of emotions with this person because they're been traumatized.
Yeah.
So you deal with that in the midst of the interview. So you're trying to do that and deal with going after him. So subsequently, and then in the interview, she said that the other girl, her friend, was still with him, and she didn't know her whereabouts. So that made it more of a pressing, not that it wasn't to begin with, but more
There's
of a
another, yeah, there's a girl out there in the
emergency
middle of it.
situation,
Yeah.
because now we got to go find another kid. So ultimately, we wound up hitting the apartment where she said she was staying with him. We found him, but we didn't find her, the other girl. And so he was taken into custody, and we had a search warrant to go in the house, so we were legally able to go in and stuff like that. So we found tons of evidence in the house to support what she was saying was going on.
Right.
So that was good. And so in the midst of doing that, I put a team together to then, while doing that, try to find the 14-year-old. And so you have different scenes going on at different times. So you're trying to manage all of that at once. So so they ultimately, while dealing with him, they ultimately did find her, the 14-year-old, and recovered her. And she provided very good detailed information. Unfortunately, she had met up with another person who was doing the same thing to her within a matter of a day. So she was recovered and provided assistance, and she provided a very detailed statement about what was going on. And then ultimately he was arrested. He was charged federally, and he likes, like most of them, they believe what they did was not wrong. And so, and he has the right to take it to trial, and he did. But ultimately, the jury found him guilty. So he was sentenced to, I believe he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He was young, not young, but I think he was in his late 20s. So he was young at the time. So but when he gets out, he'll have to deal with the fact that he's a registered sex offender for the rest of his life. And he still has, so in the federal system, when they get sentenced, they not only have to do their jail time, but when they get out, they have a length of time that's considered to be like a probationary period to make sure that they don't just go right out and mess up again. So he's got a lengthy period of time that he's on probation once he gets out. So he's, ultimately it worked out very well. The two girls were recovered. They got therapy and care right away.
Good.
And it's nice at the end of not the end of the day, but the end of the case, when you still hear from the victim, and she's relocated and gotten married and has her own
That's
family
great.
now, and she's doing very well. So it's nice to know that they still are able, not that they can't, but they're still able to do that based on
The
the
trauma. Yeah.
the trauma that they've been through.
Yeah, because
So,
there's a lot of people that can't come back from that.
right. The trauma is so bad that it just affects them so much.
Yeah,
So,
I have to tell you, Detective, just standing O for you, your team, others that work battling this huge problem in our country and others, but you're battling it here. We're just fortunate that there's enough good guys out there that just keep at it and can have the cases, just like you talked about, where people can be found and they can be rescued and they can get the therapy that they need to get back and have a beautiful life. Like you said, she started her own family. So I will make sure everybody listening, watching, there'll be graphics that go up during the podcast that show the names, the numbers, the locations. It'll be below it in the show notes. I just ask everybody, if you see something, say something. I know it sounds ridiculous because we hear it everywhere, but it's because it happens everywhere. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Pay attention to that child or the younger person that's with an adult that just doesn't seem like they're family members. And why would they be going into a hotel room together, or someone leaving a bathroom at an event? I mean, sometimes, if you pay attention and you really look around and you get your head out of your phones, you might just see something, you might save a life. And the other side to that is families need to come back together, that you need to put family first. Moms, dads, come on, regroup. You have children, take care of them. Children, respect your parents. I think a lot of this would go away if just there were stronger families at home.
yeah, and like the parents need to make sure that they're going through their children's devices. That's a big thing.
Yeah, you were a big advocate on that in our Exposed Part 1. You've got to, I'll let you talk about it, how the importance of going through your children's devices.
That's a key, because that's the first sight of hopefully finding an issue. The other thing too, with human trafficking, if the child's able to come home on a regular basis, and for some reason the child starts coming home with a lot of gifts or a lot of money or dresses and outfits that you didn't buy them, you start questioning why and where, and demanding answers as to why and where, and figure that out, because those are also key signs. You haven't paid for them to get their hair or nails done in months, and yet every week they have their hair and nails done, and they don't have a job. So how are they getting that done? Somebody's got to be paying for that, and who is? And if it's somebody else, why?
Always
Why?
ask why. Yeah.
Why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it because they love me. They're taking care of me. Well, no, there's got to be some more to that. So I would encourage them to look for those red flags and look for those signs, and keep on top of it, to make sure that there's nothing going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're like the people at the extended stay, don't just bury your head in the sand. Call the police, save these kids.
Yes. And a lot of times the hotel either doesn't know what's going on or doesn't want to know what's going on, because again, they're in for the money. So some of them won't question what's going on, because I didn't have that room rented before and now I have the room rented, so I'm making my money. So their bottom line's fine. So they don't question it. So that's another reason why they're not sometimes as eager to want to report it as others, because it affects their bottom line.
Just I don't know how people can sleep at night knowing somebody's being horribly sexually abused and they've got a room rented. I just can't. I just can't even go there. I know it's reality, but to me, that's just so inhuman. It's just horrid.
Yeah.
Well, Detective, thank you so much for your time. I will let you go back to all the important things you have going on in your life. And I thank you again for coming back for a second time on to Forensic Friday. I have a funny feeling we'll probably talk to you sometime with another topic. But in any case, thank you for being here today with Forensic Friday on Exposed Part 2, The Dark Side to Human Trafficking. I truly, truly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having me.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, look down below, see the subscribe button, go ahead and click it. I truly appreciate your support for the Forensic Friday podcast. Thank you.